You're muted, Cyntha.
Hi, everyone. I see some familiar faces. Fantastic. Those that come before and those that are new for the first time. Could everybody just type in the chat where you're from? It's just wonderful to get a sense of where everyone is worldwide. It'd be great. I know some of you are from Dubai and some of you from the US. And where, if you are in the US, where in the US? It's wonderful just to see this. Great, great. From Sharjah via New York. Auckland, wonderful. Boone, North Carolina, Rosendale, New York. Hello, Jesse. Great. Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Phoenix, Pennsylvania. Love it. Granite Bay, California. Love it. All over the US. I know there are a couple others from Dubai that are in here. Brilliant, just brilliant. And welcome, welcome everyone. Kentucky, Maine. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you all. Just nice to feel our global community. So I would just like to have you all just drop in for a moment. We had that beautiful prayer, which is always, I love when Summer does it. It's so special to me. I just want us to just drop in for a moment and then we'll begin. So if everyone would just close your eyes and just allow yourselves to take a deep breath in. Pause at the crest, at the top of that breath, and slowly exhale. Extending that exhale. Inhaling again. And release. And one more time. Pausing and releasing. And then just let the breath continue in a more natural fashion. And just allow yourselves to settle into the theme of this particular presentation, this particular training. It's on grief. And the Spanish word is Pesar. And it's the heaviness of grief. I also call this sorrow, a gutted grief, a real deep grief. So just however this particular theme has any relevance to you currently, or if it's had a strong presence in your life at a different time of your life, and it really made itself known to you, you came to know it very deeply. Someone very, very special to you died, or you lost something very, very dear to you, whether through fire, whether through theft, whether through death, whether through just a natural ending or a betrayal ending, whatever that may be, but that deep grief of loss. We're going to explore that, and we're going to do some experiential work with it, and then we're going to open up to question and answer. But for this moment, I want you to just access it for yourself, that territory, so that as I take you on a brief presentation journey, you will be able to overlay your own experience with the concepts I highlight and the concepts that I deeply evoke. I also want to honor the confidentiality of our group that we're making here for the first time, and the sacredness of this circle. Thanks to the technology that allows it. And I trust the maturity of the soul that you are that has called you to be here. So lastly, one more time, just calling in that territory of grief that you have known, opening to the healing as was evoked in this beautiful prayer that Samar brought in, but bringing it in again, opening yourself, surrendering yourself to the healing, letting the words, the feelings, the ahas, the intuitions, and everything else that will come, the mirrors of certain people that may share later in the call, letting all of it touch you and bring you into a greater place of wholeness within yourself. And very gently, taking a nice, calm, full breath. Holding that for just a moment, and then very slowly exhaling it. And as you do, gently coming back into the presence here. Lovely to see those I know and those I'm getting to know for the first time. It's wonderful. And great. So I'm going to just say a couple words before I start. Actually, I'm going to share my screen and then just let you. Oh, dear Summer, could you make me a co-host? Thank you so much. Wonderful. Let me just
should work now, Cyntha.
Yes, I see. Thank you, my dear. Just doing the little mechanics that are necessary here to do this. There we go. Done. Okay, gorgeous. Got it. Okay. So let me just first introduce myself. So I'm first of all blessed to know Summer all these many, many years. I met her, I've lost count, a long time ago, a couple decades ago. And we've been on a very rich journey. So it's my honor to be here. I originally come from the United States. I'm of Mexican and Caucasian European background. And I'm really honored to present on this particular theme. It has a lot of meaning for me professionally and personally. Professionally, I teach an emotional bodywork course on a regular basis, as well as a transpersonal counseling course. And this concept has been very much part of bringing a sensitivity into this world. I lost a very dear partner 11 years ago, and that was my intimate encounter with grief like I had never known it before. Other than I would add actually some inner child material. Inner child material, I also knew grief in a different way. But in that more personal relationship way, in that place where you're broken open, that was an initiation. And on the 4th anniversary of his death, I had a download that I was to create a course, and that's what I'm going to show you here. Let's see here. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to show you here. I created something called the Grieving Odyssey, and I mapped my own process. And so I'm going to take you on that process, and we're going to spend a little bit more time in the second one, which, excuse me, just there we go, on number 6, stage number 6. So as I mapped my own journey, and as well as all the many years of working with clients and students, I saw that I expanded Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model. And so if we take a particular experience that we have, first we have a level of denial and shock and numbness. And then we move into a reactive anger often. And it's not always exactly in this order, but it tends to be the wave of the order. And we go back and forth on these stages. But then after the anger, it subsides a bit, and then we go into a bargaining, like, oh, I guess it's not so bad. Or if in the case of a diagnosis, oh, maybe if I do this, it will stop the illness. And then there comes a point where it's like bargaining is like another version of denial. And then there comes a place where we hit on another layer of more acute anger, and that's betrayal. And the why I put the two together, betrayal and guilt, is because often on the journey of grieving, there's a place where we can become very angry at ourselves, and that's a version of guilt. And then we move into the gray territory of depression. And that place is a very initiatory stage. The definition of depression I use is it's a place which we're going to explore actually, I believe on the next call with melancholy. But I'm going to go into that more next call. But for this one, I'll just say it's a key initiation point because it's the place where we're in gestation. We're in the darkness, the dark night of the soul. We don't know what's on the other side when we're ever going to come out of it. And it has a purpose. It's growing us. It's cultivating us. It's getting us ready for either intense anger, that unleashed place where you completely let down, or the place where we're going to explore today. And once we explore this, once we let go, it's a place of surrender, which I'm going to explain a little bit more in a minute. Then the stages continue. Once we get through that initiation of fully letting go, which we're going to explore deeply today, then we move into an understanding of what is really going on, an understanding of the woundedness or the circumstances. Then we move into heart compassion. We eventually tip into natural forgiveness. And then we accept that this just couldn't have been any other way. And then we're properly ready to let go. And we have gratitude for the lessons learned. And then we move into a rebirth. And that can take a long time for certain levels of grief. So let me go into a little bit more of what is this pesar, or gutted grief. So I've broken this down. I hope it's not too wordy for you all. So there are two words that is very special, and that's heartbreak, broken open, where you're defenseless. It's a key stage on this Grieving Odyssey, and it's an ego death. If you don't know what an ego death is the place where the ego, which it has its purpose, it's the place that interfaces with our defense mechanisms, with the world. It protects us from certain things we're not ready for. It can have sometimes where we inflate, where we are more lack of confidence. It's a place where we can deny. It has its deep purpose. But there's a place when the gutted sadness happens, that the ego just dies and says, I'm defenseless. I have no use here. I don't even know how to defend against this. And that is a point where we actually touch a place of relief. We just don't fight anymore. We weep, we cry, we let go. We just stay in bed all day. We are in public and we can't stop crying and we don't even care anymore. It's just the place where the avalanche comes and we say, come, take me, take me. And what always happens on the other side of that is this incredible light and calm that comes. It's this place where we just come, and as I write here, can be some of the sweetest moments of our life, where we're the most authentic, the most honest. And also, it's the place where we touch our most authentic, real self and connect to the divine sometimes in the most exquisite way than we ever have in our entire life. Because there's no ego and there's no posturing, we're able to let in the divine more than we ever have. We also break open to compassion for all beings. We just realize, oh, anyone that's gone through this, I get them now. Or anyone that's gone through suffering, your heart just opens to them. You just you become so humble, you become so kind, you just become gentler with others because you get it. And then lastly, of course, you just feel so connected to all beings. So I just want to take you in I'm going to just do another little brief visualization, and then I'm going to leave these prompts up. I'm going to work with these questions right now, but I want to access it through a deeper state for you to know it within yourself. So if you can just close your eyes again, I'm just going to put in some very gentle music. Actually, I'm going to need to stop sharing this screen, and then I will come to that later. So just settle in, just take some deep breaths. Breathing in, breathing out, really extending the breath, really opening, letting the words I've just shared, the concepts I've just shared, to be with you. And just let yourself feel a place of quiet within. And as you're holding that space, just let yourself feel, where have you felt this level of being broken open? See the incident, see the person that you have lost, see this life situation that you have lost. It could have been a health situation, something with the body. It could be something relational. It could be something professional, where you literally felt your heart would break. Maybe it's still active. And just let yourself feel that tenderness and that kindness towards yourself. Maybe it's a deep scar that you will hold the rest of your life because it was just such an impactful loss. And even though it may not be as alive and active, just bringing tender compassion to yourself right now. Let yourself recollect if there was a place where you touched a place of absolute relief, like I just quit fighting. Any incidents where you remember that moment where you stopped fighting, where you didn't go to work, where you cried like a baby, where you screamed, where you cried out, where you again felt like your heart was going to break. And a place where you opened to greater suffering of the human experience as a result. And then lastly, in all of that initiation, because it is a true initiation, was there a gift that revealed itself once you braved such annihilation, such devastation, where you just renounced? Was there a gift that came? Is there a place where you haven't fully let go? As I'm speaking, you're like, I haven't fully touched that place that she's talking about. Sometimes when we hold back and fully surrendering to such grief, there's shame. There's shame of being so vulnerable, of not being in control, of being messy in our emotional state. Sometimes there's shame of that other people aren't seeing it as such a big deal, but for you it really was, and that you're not being mirrored in that grief. Maybe you weren't validated by someone that you wish could have seen you, or a society wasn't validating you, a community, an institution, and it makes it even more difficult. And then I'm just going to ask you to very gently just take a deep breath. And lastly, last question as we emerge, what does this theme of grief want next in your life? How does it most want to be supported? Trust your intuition that comes when I ask this question. And very gently, just allowing yourselves, just take another very deep breath to come back. And very gently open your eyes. And if you have something to write with, jot down. I'm going to put up these prompts just to support you again. So, move these over. There we go. Where have you felt this level of being broken open, where you felt your heart would break? I didn't add this. I was inspired in the meditation to add the piece that if there's any place where you weren't validated, or the place where the grief hasn't been fully able to express itself so far, and if there are any gifts. And lastly, what you would most, or what you sense, intuit, of where you need to take this grief next. Just taking a moment to jot down anything. I'm just going to give you about 3 minutes. We're going to explore a couple other pieces, and then we're going to open it up to question and answer. And just to remind you that this stage in the grieving process is absolutely necessary for us to be free. If we don't touch this place, then any forgiveness that we may be convinced that we've done completely and are done with usually carries an element of what we call spiritual bypassing, the place where we're skipping this absolute renunciation of the ego. And there's usually two territories. It's the anger and the sadness that are, if we've really let go to those two emotions thoroughly, then any forgiveness that we may genuinely feel, we can pretty much count on. Of course, there are waves and there are different layers, but there needs to be some depth to that anger and some depth to the sadness like we're talking about here today. So I'm just going to give you one more minute, and then I want to carry on with just a couple other pieces I want to share, and then we'll open it up. And if any emotion is coming up for you, let your breath be slow and extended, to just hold that compassion for yourself as you're being with this theme. So I'm going to move on. So then the other thing that I want to say is that what we're doing here is, in these talks and these presentations that I'm doing with Samar here, initially it started to be for the Arvigo body workers, the Arvigo healers, and which is this beautiful Mayan and Western mixed tradition. Samar can share more because I know some of you newcomers are new to this. But this, what I'm going to share with you is when I offer this, I like to offer this as a continuing education for anyone that is a body worker, given the Arvigo umbrella. But what the tips I'm going to say are tips for everybody. And so whether you're a body worker or you're a mother, you're a lover, you're a sister, I believe it's all women on the call. These are applicable for life. But if you are a body worker, they're more delicious and effective when they're honed. So I'm going to just go over these a bit. So presencing is primordial. That is a foundation, that ability to hold space. And of course, in order for us to be able to hold space, and I kind of repeat that a little bit, of sacred, still space, but that's being fully present for the other. So presencing is more, I'm fully there for you. I'm also able to hold the sacred space and create sacred space. And in order to cultivate that, of course, behind the scenes, it means that we have to take care of and tend to our temple and our instrument. And in order to be an effective body worker, we need to watch our diet. We need to watch everything and anything we consume, whether that's food, whether that's alcohol, whether that's any kind of substance like nicotine or other drugs. It also is important what we consume around media and the kind of music we listen to and the kind of conversations we engage in. So all of this will create an instrument that's more refined and able more readily to offer this kind of presencing and stillness. If we tend to use caffeine as a coping mechanism, and a lot of it, my experience has been it's very difficult to hold still space when there's a lot of caffeine running through the system. So this is just something that we want to bring attention to and compassionate awareness to. Breathing mindfully. And so for any of you who've been on these calls before, it's something I come to over and over again. When we're with grief, we're in the sacred wound of that person. And we want to breathe very mindfully, very still. And when we do that, it shows a great respect for the other, but it also invites them to let go, because it's not a more hyper breath that they may be in out of reactivity, but it's a grounding breath. And then sometimes with grief, it's wonderful to simply ask, is there any part of your body you would just like me to hold? Where it's not any technique, it's not rocking, it's not probing, it's not massaging, just holding it in this territory. That's why I'm bringing it up in this landing spot of grief. Just holding someone. It gives them that wonderful container that they can surrender to, because the word, one of the key words, of course, I've used it a few times, is to let go, surrender to the grief. And if you're going to have that ego death and you're going to let go and just let yourself feel the full feelings, when you're held, you're reassured and you're grounded. When, of course, I already mentioned diet, eat lightly before and eat enough. If you're overly distracted or you're grumbling a little too much, that can be distracting. And so you want to just, you're going into sacred territory. And to honor the person that their shame may be activated, and to reassure them your tears are welcome. Let go to whatever you have to let go to. I am fully here for you. I do not judge any expression of this. That is often very important. I've noticed this particularly with men and many women. It's human, it's a human experience. All right, and the next thing I want to honor here is something so simple, but the idea of tissues. How do we handle tissues? And this is also with your loved ones, whether you're a body worker, healer, or not. Tissues are an issue sometimes. And tissues can be invasive or they can be neglectful. So sometimes we're so in it, even if we're slobbering and snotty and wet and all over, the tissue will become an interference. Sometimes we really need a tissue. And so we ask, when we're with someone and we're holding that space, it's to feel the nuance, because if we get it wrong, we can cut their process. And sometimes that's what's meant to be. But the more we bring attention to the nature of tissues, because with grief comes tissues, and we want to bring a greater sensitivity to that. So these are just some words. And then lastly if, if just how am I about my own, what we call in therapeutic terms, my own countertransference around crying. Do I myself have some difficulties of letting go to tears, or I judge emotion? Maybe I grew up with a parent that was highly emotional and use that emotion in a manipulative manner, and I may be wary of emotion. So it's always important to keep track of our countertransference, whether we're in a professional role or just a loved one role, to keep that in awareness, so that we're fully available and kind of hold back our own reaction to that. And I just say, if we are going to offer a tissue, to make the gesture silently, or just put it in their lap. And I just sometimes say, if you want a tissue, I've just put a couple on your lap right now, because maybe their eyes are closed. So you want to bring that sensitivity. And then the next couple aspects, I just want to say that when we're in the territory of deep grief and deep sorrow, is that how do we handle touching? And so sometimes it is the most appropriate thing to do. And I know in certain places of the world, touching is super controversial now because of certain areas where that's been abused. But if you are capable, or also for a loved one, I mean, this is just good, etiquette at an emotional level to know. And so I'm going to leave the laws out for a moment. But sometimes it is very appropriate, even if you're in a professional position, to just put your hand on their knee, or to give them a hug, to just give that grounding, even if they're just sitting in front of you and it's not a classic bodywork session, to just hold them and just say, or would you like a hug right now, to ask them. That can be appropriate, and to feel into that. And then I just say, be careful of any countertransference that they may have on you as the healer, and the potential fear that they may say no, of how you are with that. So that's just one thing to be always aware of. Feel their body language. And then the second thing is about your own crying. So if you are a professional, and I feel this one's really directed when you're a professional, when is it appropriate to cry? And my experience has been that sometimes it's just the human spontaneous thing and my eyes well up. Now, I've never had the experience where I'm sobbing. That would be more my process. And so I keep that in check. Or if something is coming right on and it's hitting on my stuff, I do everything to control that, because it is about being present for the other. But my eyes have watered, or I've shed a few tears in a very empathetic, compassionate way with the person, and it's been the most appropriate thing. And I have felt there was nothing off about that. So I just want to name that, because sometimes they're very simple things and very commonsensical things, but we may say, is this really acceptable? And just by naming it, it gives a permission, and it gives a conversation and a reflection for it. And I think, I'm just going to go through these quickly, because I want to open now. I want to leave some minutes for our question and answer. These are tools that are wonderful to support, also to suggest to anyone when they are in grief or deep grief, or you yourself. Kirtan, which is a form of Hindu chanting, which is just exquisite.
You are using the device audio.
Oh, so sorry. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you can just, thank you. Kirtan is I love it. Sorrow is a romance with the divine, and kirtan is the serenade in such moments. I love that quote. And it's just this place where we are very deeply held with that particular music. I don't understand enough about the science of that music, but it has a way. It has a way of tending the heart. Time alone, just giving ourselves permission to have time alone, to go into the cocoon, to sleep in longer, to know this too shall pass. It doesn't mean that we're permanently in that state, to trust that inclination to time alone. That also may mean not being in social engagements as usual if we're in the period of really feeling our grief. Being with nature, being with the cycles of nature, being with nature mysticism, connecting deeply to the earth, letting the earth love you and hold you and care for you. I can't speak enough to that. And if I had more time, I would share a lot more on what that's about. But I'll just say go into nature. Breath work, breathing mindfully. And sometimes it can be some of the more expanded modalities like holotropic breath work or rebirthing or certain yoga breathwork traditions, certain pranayamas. Addiction awareness, because a lot of times when we're feeling this intensity, we want to run away from it and we want to use addiction. So bringing awareness to that and using those tools. And then lastly, bringing in forgiveness. Forgiveness is, sometimes it's too early, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's appropriate to we're so vulnerable and so opened up, the heart is open that it's an opening to allow the forgiveness in maybe for the first time. So I'm going to just leave it at that. And I will, my website, we'll put my website in later, but I'm just going to open this
Cyntha,
up for, yes.
I'm just going to say that I'm going to stop recording now so people have some spaciousness to be vulnerable, and all the content will then be available for anyone else who needs to see it.
Beautiful. I love that you're doing that. Thank you for that.